Now that we've covered the basic theory, let's move on to designing an actual report. In this chapter, we will briefly talk about what Figma is, how we use it, how we create a brand orientation, how we put together a color palette and choosing our fonts. Ultimately, we will build a wireframe and initial design. To begin with, we work in Figma. Figma is a free online prototyping tool where you can create custom designs of all shapes and sizes. Some people use Figma for the entire design process because it allows you to do pretty much anything. Moreover, Figma is known for its easy collaboration on a project. Since everything in Figma is online in the cloud, you don't have to deal with local files on your computer. When we start a project, we always begin by creating a new project in Figma. In this, we establish the brand orientation, building a color palette, and create all our sketches and designs. The first step, and you can do this with me, is to create a free Figma account on the website. Once you've created an account, you can download the desktop app for Windows or Mac, but you can also work online through the website. Personally, I downloaded the desktop app to minimize distractions while working. Once you're in Figma, we'll create a project. In this project, I'll explain how to style a simple button. Why? Because almost every feature of Figma used in design is found in a button. This includes using libraries, creating a component, working with auto layout, and eventually using variables. We'll do this by making a nicely styled and simple button with an hover effect. Now, let's dive into Figma together. First of all, this is the Figma website. As you can see, it explains all their features and you can find everything on their website. They also have a blog where the community can post their own issues or designs and creations, and also some plugins you can download for your desktop app. First of all, you can click the big purple button that says Get Started. Here you can fill in your email and create a password, and you can create your own free account. From that on, when you created an account, it will start by using the Figma online version. You can also download the desktop app if you prefer working on a desktop. Whenever you have downloaded the Figma desktop app, this is the view you will get. So I created a free theme on the left here, as you can see for this training. And on the top right, you can see the blue button that says Create a Design File. We will do this by clicking on this button, and it will open a completely new and empty file for you. So this is the same canvas you should be seeing now. It's empty. It could be white or dark, depends on your default settings on your computer, but mine is in a light mode because I prefer the light mode. I give my canvas a title and I will call it button because we're going to create a button. So my file is now called button. Now we want to actually create a button. We do that by creating a frame in Figma. We use frames, which is at the top in your menu, instead of a rectangle, because frames have many more options. So if I click on my frame, I'm going to create a simple frame by just drag and drop it and make it a rectangle shape. I will change the name of my frame to button because we're creating a button. Whenever I'm done, on the right, it created a complete menu for you. You can pick different editing tools, but for now we are going to give it rounded corners. This is my corner radius. I can do them all at the same time, or I can do independent corners, which means I can give my left top corner a different radius than my right top corner. For now, I want them all to be the same, and I'm going to give it a maximum amount of numbers, just to make sure that it's 100% round. So I just put as many zeros as I can. And I press enter. This is not necessary to do, of course, but it's just to make sure that it is round. As you can see, my button now has rounded corners, but my frame is still a rectangle, as you can see through the blue line. Now I want my button to have a nice color. So I click on my frame, and on the right you see the option to fill the frame. Right now it's completely white. You see that by the 6 Fs, which means white. If I click on this, I can change my color. And as you see, and as I told before, my colors are in hex codes. You can change this to RGB, CSS, HSL and HSB, but I keep it on hex codes. It's a lot easier to work with. So now you can just drag and pick a color you like. I want to create a purple button. So I use the slider below to slide through a purple color. I think I like this. This is my purple button. Now, if I want to create more components with the same purple color, I don't want to keep copy-pasting this color. So what you can do is add this color to your own personal library. You do this by clicking the 4 dots, which are named Style, above your fill. This is the fill of your button. When you click on Style, you see Libraries. Right now my libraries are empty, but we're going to add this purple button color as a new variable. When you click on this sign, the plus sign, you can add a style to your libraries. You can give it a name, a description, and it shows you what this color would look like. As you can see, it shows me the hex color, and this is the transparency. So it's 100% transparent. You can give it a name, so I will give this the name purple. And my description is button, because it is for my default button. When I click on Create Style, you see that my library now includes the color purple. And as you can see, my frame is not filled with a hex code anymore, but with the color purple. When I click outside my frame now, you can see that a menu popped up on the right side. These are my local styles, the styles in your project right now. As you can see, the color purple has now been added to my menu. So if I just move around by pressing my space bar, I can just click around and move around in my canvas. I can now add a custom shape. As you can see in the top menu, you have different shapes. So let's add a circle. And by holding Shift, it will stay a regular circle. By letting go of Shift, you can create any oval shape you want. I want a circle shape. And as you can see, my fill is a gray color by default. But when I click on the style option, you see that I can give it the purple color. When I click on that, my circle is now the same color as my button is. The nice part of using libraries is that you can change this color with one click. So if I think, hey, I don't like purple anymore, I want it to be bright red, you can click in your local styles at purple and you can edit your style. By clicking on this, you can edit every single item of the style, the name, the description, but also the color. When I click on the color, I can change it to whatever color I want. And as you can see, every element on my page that's linked with this color changes at the same time. So this will save you so much time by just using libraries. So I'm giving it a purple color again and click outside all of my frames. I'm going to delete my circle now because I don't need this. As you see, my button is quite empty now. I want to give it a text. I do that by clicking in the top menu and using the text object. By clicking on this, I can now click anywhere in my frame and start typing. So let's say it should say click here. I just typed that. By double clicking on it, you can edit the whole style. So on the right, you see my menu popped up, my menu text. I can change the font of my text. I can change the size of my text, font size, line height, letter spacing, and also paragraph spacing, and many other options. There are also more options under the type settings, where you can change almost everything of your text. Right now I want to give it a different font. I want to give it Poppins. You can search in the font by just searching the name of the font you want to use. I want to use Poppins, so I click on Poppins. I want it to be a medium-sized font and make it a bit bigger so it fits nicely in my button. When I hold Shift, it goes up by 10 steps. If I don't use Shift, it just goes up by 1 step. So in this case, I hold Shift because it has to be quite large to fit in my button. Let's make it 55 pixels. Everything is in pixels in Figma. I also want my text to be white because that fits better in my purple button. So when it's clicked, you can change the fill just as you did with the frame with the button. So here's my fill, and by clicking on the square, I can change the color of my text. I want my text to be completely white, and as you can see, it almost vanishes with the background. And I want to add this white to my library as well. So we're going to repeat the steps we did before. So on the right, we have this styles option. We click on it, and as you can see, the purple one is added. We're going to add the white one as well. So we click new variable, change the name, which is going to be white, description, text, and we can create our style by clicking on the blue button. As you can see, we have two styles now, purple and white. I want my text to be inside my button, but I want it to be scalable. So when my text is in the button, I want my margins and paddings to stay the same. And I do this by clicking on the frame of my button and click on the option Auto Layout. By clicking on this button, you see that a menu popped up. Auto Layout means that it gives an automated layout. With Auto Layout, you can make sure that the text will always be on the same spot and always have the same amount of margin and padding on the left or the right or the top or the bottom. We want our text to be in the middle of our button, the exact middle. As you can see, we have this option on the right here, where we can decide where our object that goes inside the frame will be. So we can say align left, center, right, top center, top right, etc. I want the object to be aligned center, in the middle of my frame. Now, when I click on my text, I can move it around and I can move it in my frame. As you can see, it's not just drag and dropping into my frame, but it's creating here on the right an option that it says, hey, it's going to be in the middle of this frame. So when I let go, you see that the whole frame resizes to the object within. When I click on my frame button again, you see that I have many more options. So I can change the horizontal padding, the vertical padding, and the horizontal gap between items, which means that if I have multiple items in my frame, I can change the space between those items. Right now, I want to give my text a little bit more breathing space, so it's not right at the edge of my button. I do this by dragging my horizontal padding to whatever much padding I want. So I make it 75 pixels. I also want my vertical padding to be a little bit more. Let's make it 20 to make it more even. And when I click out of my frame, you see that this is my button now. And because of auto layout, my padding will not change even when I change my text. So let's say we will give this a hello. As you can see, the padding on the sides and the top stay the same. It doesn't matter how long the text will be. As you can see, I can write the whole name of Pavan Lalwani, and the padding on the sides and the top stays the same. That's what auto layout does. So it's really simple to create objects with padding on the sides and the top. Now I created this simple button. I want it to be able to use throughout my design every single time. I don't want to create a new button every time I need a button. I want this to be my parent object. If you're known with coding, you know that you always have a parent object and child objects, which mean you have one default object that you can copy and paste and use throughout your whole design. And you have child objects that are the copies of the parent. So what we want is that we create one default button that we can use throughout the design, but change the text or the color of the button. But we want to keep the default styles of our button, the padding and the margin and those kind of things, the same. So we want to create a parent. And it's called a component in Figma. We do this by clicking on the button, right mouse button, and go to the bottom and say create component. You can also use Ctrl-Alt, okay? But I like to use the menu. When I click on create components, you see that it turns purple instead of blue. On the left you can see my layers. Right now my layers are only my button and the text Pavan Lalwani. You also have the option Assets. When you click on Assets, you see that I have a local component called Button. I can drag this into my file, and as you can see, I now have an extra button. I can change the text of this button back to Click Me. As you can see, my parent button didn't change at all, even though I changed my text. But if I change something about my parent button, it will change this button we just dragged into our file. If I click on my parent and decide that I don't want purple anymore, but want to use the white, you see that it changes my child button. But it doesn't change my parent if I want to create a white button of my child. That's the differences. So it's simple to create one parent button with the default settings you want to use throughout your design, but have a child button throughout your design to use and edit however you want, but you don't have to start over every single time. Now, because this is a button, we want it to have a hover effect. And we do that by creating a variable. So we click on our parent button, and on the right we have the option to give it properties. By clicking on the plus button, you create a component property. In this case, we want to create a variant because we want to have a second variant of the button, which will have the hover effect style. So when I click on variant, you see that my frame just got a little bit bigger. And then on the bottom, it says it has one variant. When I click on the plus, I can add a variant to my parent. While doing that, it creates a copy of my first element. On the right, you can see that I have a new option called variant, current variant. When I click on the whole frame, you see that it has a property. In this case, I want my property to be hover, because we want to create the hover style. By clicking on the first one, I'm going to say that this one is not my hover effect. My hover effect is turned off in this one. I type in the word off next to my hover element and click on enter. On the bottom one, I want this to be my hover effect. As you can see, it's called variant 2 now. And I will change this to on. So we have on and off right now. I also want to switch the colors, so you actually have an effect when hovering over the button. At the bottom, you see selection colors. This means all the colors within my selection. So that means the text and the background color. I want everything that's purple right now to be white, and I want my text to be purple. By going inside the frame, you can hold Ctrl-Shift, and as you can see, I can go inside my frame now by pressing Ctrl-Shift. When I click on my text, I go back to my color and change it to purple. As you can see, I created an inverted version of my button. Right now, we created two different buttons with two different styles, but it's all within one button. So as you can see on the left, to our local components, we still have one button. When you hover over it, you see a 2 pop up. Includes 2 variants. Those are the variants we just created. The hover off variant and the hover on variant. And because using the words on and off, or true and false, Figma creates a slider for you. So when I go to my child, this is my child version, you see on the right that an extra menu popped up. This is my variant menu. As you can see, I have a hover with a slider now. When I click on this, my hover effect is on. When I turn it off, it's off again. And as you can see, the click me text stays the same. So I can change this text to whatever I want, let's say my own name. And by clicking on it and turning the hover effect off again, you see that it stays my name. So this is my child of my parent component. By using libraries, you can create a simple button, one simple button with how many effects you want, and just use it throughout your design. So I can just drag and drop how many I want. And as you can see now, when I change my purple in my library to any color I want, you see that it changes throughout my whole design. And this is why working with Figma, libraries, components, variables, etc. is a really nice and time-saving way of working. So when I create a design, I always create my own libraries with colors, my own libraries with fonts, because you can do the same thing with fonts as you can do with colors. I create my own components. I also made variables whenever it's necessary. And we also created at Figma a complete Power BI visuals library. In this library, I created simple components of the default visuals of Power BI, let's say a line chart, and I created every single possibility of the line chart in a variable. So for example, I create one with X and Y axis and without the axis. I also create options with the smooth line and the normal line. I created an option where the area part is turned on and off. So in that way, you can create a really simple library. So let me show this to you. If I move my canvas to the right, it will be empty again. On the left, I have an option called libraries. These are my uploaded libraries that I can access. Not everybody can access these libraries. When I click on this, you see that I've created many libraries. As you can see, I created all the color palettes that are available in Power BI. I also created an icon library with white and black icons, but I also created a Power BI visual sheet. When I click on Add to File, this visual sheet is added to my current file. When I clicked on it, you see that on the left, a menu pops up. Here you see all the default visuals of Power BI with the default color scheme. As I said, I created a line chart, so let me pop this into my screen. When I hold Z, I can zoom into you. As you see, this is a simple regular line chart as known in Power BI. When I click on this line chart, you see that I've created multiple variables. So I can turn on and off the grid, create a curved line if I want to, make it one line instead of two, and give it a fill. But because everything is connected with each other, I also can keep turning on and off elements and it doesn't change all my other settings. So it's not like that I have one variant with a grid. No, I created a variant with a grid with and without a curved line, with and without two lines, and with and without a fill. So this takes up a lot of time to set up, but it will save you a lot of time when you want to use this in your design. I also created a simple container that I can drag and drop into my file, and by zooming out you can see how I used auto layout. So when clicking on my simple container, which contains a line, which is the divider in Power BI, the categories being turned on and off, and the subtitle being turned on and off, the only option I didn't create is turning on and off the title, because the title is always turned on. When I disconnect detach instance, disconnect this component from its parent, I can do whatever I want again. I can also drag my line chart into this component. As you can see, I can drag it everywhere the blue line pops up. I want it to be below my categories. Because everything is created in auto layout, I also have the option to make this one scale together with my container. I do this by changing my frame settings. Right now my frame settings are on fixed, but I can do fill container. As you can see by the red arrow, it will fill the complete container. I click on this and as you can see it's filled. I do the same thing. So when I click on my complete container right now and I resize it, you see that my line chart stays the same. It resizes together with my container. And this is all because I built this with auto layout. This makes designing for us so much more easy, efficient and simple. These are some basic Figma rules and tips and tricks we follow when we create a design. Now that we've explored Figma a bit, let's actually get to work in it. We'll start by creating a brand orientation. This means we research a company, what colors do they use online, how is their website structured, are there any financial reports available in a published PDF? We go through all these details by Googling the brand. A useful tip to find as much information as possible about a company is to Google the company name with PDF added at the end. This way, it's possible you'll find official published documents. So you can see how they create their graphs and KPIs and big numbers right now. I have in front of me the official Dutch Netflix website. This is the very first thing you see when you Google Netflix. When I look at this website, I'm searching for specific elements that stand out to me as a designer. What is something that repeats a lot or is very noticeable? Now, if you look at this page, what stands out to you? What are elements that you can reuse when you create a design? I will give you a moment and take a look at this Netflix landing page. What catches my attention is, of course, the logo, but also the drop-down at the top on the right to choose a language. This also looks like a Power BI slicer to me. The use of buttons with rounded corners, the large white font, and of course, everything is in dark mode. There's also a big image in the background that they use. They use a different opacity, and it's all very clean and simple. So these are some things that catches my eye when I take a look at this Netflix landing page. There's also the option to Google Netflix dashboard. And I look at the images when I do this. I notice that many people also think that dark mode is a characteristic feature of Netflix. Additionally, the color red is quite prominent. As I mentioned before, this might not be the best idea because of the association with negative results in a report. Furthermore, the reports I see here seem quite messy. Personally, I believe we can do better. It's a fun challenge, especially since the Netflix brand style is not very easy to work with. Throughout the rest of the training, we will use this brand style when creating a design. Here you can see the brand orientation I created in Figma. On the right you can see that I added my colors to my local libraries, so I can reuse them in my design again, especially the Netflix red. I also downloaded the SVG files of the actual logo. When I zoom in, you see that this is an SVG file, so I can edit all the information within this image. So when I want to change this to black, you see that my image changes. Same thing goes for this Netflix symbol, which is also an SVG file I downloaded from the website. I also found some official documents where they used red in their graphs. I wouldn't personally do this, but I understand why a company like Netflix does this. I also found some images where they used big numbers. This is something we can use in our design as well. They also have a separate website for Netflix research articles. This website looks a little bit different than their main landing page. So I added this to my file as well, just so you can see their different ways of communicating to the outside world. I also found this image where you can see a huge map that Netflix created. This reminded me of creating a scatter plot. So this is something we can reuse in our design if we want to. And if I find an interesting PDF with some nice information about how they use their graphs, I create a text file and add a link to it. So I can always go back to this file without having to Google it again. So this is my brand orientation for Netflix. This is all the information that is useful that I could find. And now we can actually start by creating a color palette. After creating this brand orientation, I move on to make a color palette. There are a few rules to consider when making a color palette. For example, avoid using bright neon colors within a theme. Also, the colors of a brand's identity might not be the right fit for BI. However, you can incorporate these colors in sentiment colors. Think of Netflix red. I wouldn't use this color in a chart, but it fits perfectly for the negative color. In the case of Netflix, for this training, I decided to take some risk. Since this is going to be a dark mode design, we're not going to follow all these rules, and I will show you in a short time. As you can see here, red signals a negative result. It is also a very bright color. Imagine having 5 visuals next to each other with this bright red color. So you can use a grayscale tone, so you're not getting overwhelmed with all these colors and it's easier to read. However, you can use red or the brand colors for sentiment colors if they fit, as long as there's a clear difference between okay and not okay, positive and negative. So let's dive into Figma right now by creating a color palette for our dark mode design of Netflix. As you can see over here, I created a little bit of inspiration for myself, how to create a dark mode dashboard without being overwhelmed by too much color, without using the wrong colors, and also create something that looks like Netflix. So if I zoom in over here, I created a container like I did with the line chart in the beginning, and I started playing around with my colors. So this one is a little bit brighter than the one on the right. But as you can see, I did use a Figma red color, except I toned it down a bit. So as you can see on the fill on the right side, it is not my Netflix red. I can create Netflix red, but it will be a little bit too bright. So this is a color palette that is useful for a dark mode design. If I make a copy of this and create the fill back to white, you see that it's very intense. It's a little bit of a carnival to me. I wouldn't do this for a light mode design. I also think it's quite heavy on the eyes in a dark mode design, but we want to keep the challenge going. When searching for fonts, it's important to consider readability and a professional look. At the time of writing this training, Power BI only offers 25 fonts. I know this will be expanded in the future, but the exact timing is unclear. Among the current 25 fonts, only a handful are useful. This list even includes Wingdings and Comic Sans, which are almost unusable fonts. Our 6 favorite fonts that we often use are Sego UI, Din, Lucida Sans, Arial, Verdana, and Calibri. Here are 3 examples of fonts. To start, no font is wrong to use. Consider the dashboard users. In the first example, Comic Sans is used. This font doesn't give me a professional look. However, if you're creating a playful report with data from a daycare, here are 3 examples of fonts. To start, no font is wrong to use. Consider the dashboard users. In the first example, Comic Sans is used. This font doesn't give me a professional look. However, if you're creating a playful report with data from a daycare, it might be fitting. In the second example, you see Georgia. It works well for large texts, like titles, but it becomes unreadable as the font size decreases. So I wouldn't use this font, for example, on the X and Y axis. In the last example, you see the Sego UI font. This font is clear and easy to read. It remains readable even at a small size, making it suitable for a report. So let's dive into Figma together and pick out a font for our Netflix dashboard. Whenever I go into Figma and pick out a font for my project, I always keep a picture besides me of the actual fonts in Power BI. So this is a screenshot of the 25 fonts that Power BI offers. Most of the time I pick a font like Segu or Arial, Calibri, those kind of things. In the case of Netflix, I would like something new. I almost never pick the font Trebuchet. I have no idea if I said that right, but you know what I mean. This is a font that is also available in Power BI. It's the Trebuchet MS, which probably means Microsoft. It looks a lot like the font they use in their official documents. It's just a little bit more playful and good readable from a distance. So if I zoom out a little bit, it's still readable. This is the font I want to use for my Netflix design. After creating a color palette and selecting colors, we move on to making a wireframe. What is a wireframe? It's a simple layout of just a page. It doesn't involve colors or details, just basic simple shapes. For instance, you might use the word logo to indicate where the logo will go instead of placing the actual brand logo. Without spending too much time on designing, you can effectively think about the placement of elements. So as you can see on the preview on the screen, we most of the times just scribble something on screen and just think about the global placement of elements. At the bottom of your screen you can see different ways to do this. So you can see the logo again, an icon which can be the same icon over and over again just to indicate, hey, this is where I want to put an icon. An image is always a square with a cross in between. A video can have a video player image inside. The text field doesn't include the actual text, but just lines. Buttons are just a square with the text button. All those kind of things are simple ways to create a layout for your design, but don't have to think about actual designing. When we start wireframing, we do this for our DAR principle. When delivering a report to a client, we always follow a DAR sequence. DAR stands for Dashboard, Analysis and Report. When creating a design, we focus on the DAR pages. This way, we address the formatting of the most commonly used visualizations. On the dashboard page, you typically find KPIs and at most a few visualizations supporting these KPIs. The Analysis page contains visualizations that delve deeper into the content. The Report page often includes tables only and matrices. This is the deepest level of detail of the report. Here we can see a few examples of wireframes of these three reports. So on the left, you can see a wireframe of the dashboard page, which includes only the KPIs, and it's just the same KPI copied over and over. On the bottom, you can see a wireframe of an analysis page, which just shows you where my visuals should go. I am not thinking about what kind of visuals I want to show, but it's just a simple layout where my slices will be, where I will place a button, if I have a navigation bar at the bottom, where my logo will be, and where my visuals will be. On the right, you can see the report, which is just a simple table to indicate that this is my report page, where you can only see detailed leveling of my report. Here you can see an example of a dark mode design for my Netflix dashboard page. I used a new card visual to indicate my KPIs, and this design can be replicated in Power BI. I also looked at elements from Netflix that I could reuse, such as the logo, the slicer based on the website's dropdown, and a large banner photo. Here is the design for my Analysis page, where I implemented the latest update of Power BI, allowing you to format the bars. As you can see, I chose the red color here because designing in dark mode is a bit trickier to follow standard rules. Additionally, you notice that I kept the page as clean as possible with a maximum of 4 visualizations. Plenty of space between them and not too much information on the pages. I also added navigation buttons on the bottom of the page. For the design of the report page, I created a very simple table. This page is otherwise completely empty in terms of visualizations. At this deep level in the report, the user doesn't need more than a clear table. This design can also be used as a drill-through page. And after creating all my DAR pages, I also made a simple homepage with just a background photo similar to the Netflix site. It includes the logo, a welcome message, and 2 buttons that navigate through the dashboard and the report pages. As you can see, it's very easy to create a simple design that aligns with an existing design like a website. So let's get into Figma right now and I will show you these pages in detail. As you can see on your screen right now, we're into Figma. These are the designs you just saw in my presentation. So let's start from left to right. So we start with the front page, then we will get to the dashboard page, analysis page, and at the end, the details of the report page. First of all, this is my front page. So how did I make this in Figma? It is really simple. When I start creating a page in Figma for Power BI, I always start by creating a frame, like we did with the button before. So on the top left you can create a frame and it shows you some simple pre-made frames for you on the right. So you can create an iPhone page, tablet, desktop, but also a presentation. And the presentation option has the slide 16:9. This is the default size of a Power BI page. So I always create, and let me show you how you do that, a presentation slide. By clicking on this, it will create a new frame for you, which is the exact sizing of a Power BI page. So I use this as my default basis before I start actually designing. So if we get back to my front page, we start by creating a default frame size of 16:9. Then I start just adding elements. In this case, I added an image, some simple text, which one part is bigger than the other part, and I also created some buttons with an auto layout, so my text is in the middle of my button. This is my dashboard page. And as you can see, this one is a bit more challenging to create yourself. I worked with the latest Power BI updated version, which is the December 2023 version. So I started working with the new card visual in Power BI, and I really like this new visual and wanted to use this one in my training. As you can see, I created this new card visual. And if I hover over it, you see that this is just one frame, just like with the button before. So we can click into this and see how many frames this has. As you can see, even my KPI cards are in an auto layout. So I can change the size between my components, in this case my KPI cards. I gave them a spacing of 21 pixels because that was enough for me. This is the horizontal gap between items. I told this before when creating a button, but we only had one item in our frame, which was only the text in a button. In this case, we have 4 items in our frame, the 4 cards, so we can change the horizontal gap between these items. I also added auto layout within the cards, so I created a vertical layout between these text sizes. As you can see, when I hover over the vertical gap between items, you can see this pink rectangle pop up. We can change this by just dragging this option and create it how big or how small we want it. But keep in mind, like we said before, keep the limitations of Power BI in mind. You can make it as beautiful as you want, but you still have to be able to recreate this in Power BI. So if we move to the Analysis page, I made a little mistake. Because with the newest Power BI December 2023 update, you can edit the bars and the columns within the visuals. And I thought that you can change the bars within the pie and the donut chart as well. That was wrong. I didn't test this out before I started designing. So I created this cool design where everything has this really nice futuristic look with the opacity down, giving everything a line, and did the same thing for my donut chart. But it turns out that you can't actually change this in Power BI. And eventually it will happen in the future. I'm pretty sure about that. But we can't right now. So we can ignore this design a little bit. But I also wanted to start and play around with this new bar design. So I created this simple design with just a bar chart, a horizontal bar chart, a line chart and a donut chart, just to show you some options. I also created a slicer at the top with a refresh slicer button, so users can always refresh their slicers with just one click. At the bottom you can see that I created some navigation buttons, so you can always go back or to the next page or back to your home page, which is the first page of your report. Then lastly, I created a report page with just one single table. I didn't put too much time into this because the table has a lot of design options. And for me, it's really easy to just indicate, hey, this is where a table will be. And it should look something like this. So this page, I didn't really put so much time and effort into the design because I will do that when we get to Power BI. So if we get back to the presentation, this is just an example where I put both side by side. You can immediately recognize the visual style with just a few elements. The Netflix landing page we saw before, and our front page design that we will recreate in Power BI. It both has the same image used, the same style of typography, and also the buttons with the rounded corners, the red button with the white text. I like to reuse these design elements when creating a design. And as you can see, with just a few elements, because if you take a look at my front page design, it only has a background, a logo, a text, and buttons, which are only 4 elements. So it's really simple to create with just as minimal elements as you want, a design that looks like something that has already been created.